He thought humiliating a quiet woman would entertain his kitchen. But before the night was over, the man who ruled New York's most exclusive dining room would learn what real greatness looked like. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now back to Emily Carter. The winter rain tapped softly against the tall front windows of Lauron House, a 5-star restaurant on Manhattan's Upper East Side where reservations were booked 3 months in advance and a single tasting menu cost more than most families spent on groceries in a week. Inside, polished brass lights glowed over white linen tables, crystal glasses caught the warm light, and wealthy guests spoke in low voices designed to sound important. But behind the dining room, past the swinging doors and stainless steel counters, the kitchen moved like a battlefield of precision. Orders were shouted, burners hissed, knives struck cutting boards in rapid rhythm, and every second belonged to one man. Chef Victor Lauron stood in the center of it all with a starched white jacket and the expression of someone who believed the world existed to meet his standards. At 48, Victor was famous for his temper, feared for his criticism, and celebrated by magazines that called him a genius. He accepted the praise as if it were overdue rent. "Move faster," he snapped at a line cook arranging herbs with trembling fingers. "That garnish looks tired." The young man quickly corrected it. No one argued with Victor. No one ever did for long. Then the back door opened. A woman stepped inside carrying a small canvas tote bag darkened by rain. She wore a faded gray sweater, inexpensive jeans, and flat shoes still wet from the sidewalk. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, and she moved with the quiet caution of someone entering a room where she expected not to be welcomed. Phew! People looked at her twice. In places like Lauron House, invisibility was often decided in the first second. She approached the prep station and waited until someone noticed her. "Can I help you?" asked a dishwasher without looking up. "I'm here about the temporary kitchen assistant shift," she said softly. "My name is Emily Carter. I spoke with the manager this afternoon." Before the dishwasher could answer, Victor turned. His eyes moved over her sweater, her shoes, the simple tote bag, and then back to her face. The pause said everything. "You?" he asked. "You're the replacement?" Emily nodded politely. "Only for tonight, if you still need someone." A few cooks exchanged glances. Someone smirked. Victor let out a dry laugh. "This is not a soup kitchen," he said. "We run one of the finest restaurants in America." The room filled with nervous chuckles from staff who knew laughter was safer than silence. Emily remained still. "I understand," she replied. "I'm here to work." Victor stepped closer, folding a towel over one shoulder. "Do you have any kitchen experience, Miss Carter?" "Some," she said. "Some," he repeated loudly, earning more laughter. "Wonderful. We're saved." He looked around the kitchen, enjoying the moment. "Listen carefully. Tonight we have investors in table 12, a food columnist at table 7, and a private party spending more money than you've probably seen in a month. So try not to touch anything expensive." The room laughed harder this time. Emily lowered her eyes for a moment, then quietly set her tote bag beneath a shelf. Her hands were calm. Her breathing was steady. She tied on an apron hanging nearby as if she had done it thousands of times before. Victor noticed but dismissed it. Arrogance often mistakes confidence for ignorance. Then a server burst through the doors, pale and breathless. "Chef, we have a problem. Marcus just called. He's sick. He's not coming." The kitchen froze. Marcus was Victor's lead saucier, the only man trusted to prepare the restaurant's signature reduction for the 9-course tasting menu. Victor's jaw tightened. He looked at the clock. Dinner service began in 12 minutes. Then slowly a cruel idea formed behind his eyes. He turned toward Emily Carter and smiled the kind of smile that never meant kindness. Victor Lauron smiled the way men smile when they believe humiliation is clever. He glanced around the kitchen, making sure everyone was watching, then picked up the clipboard with the night's menu and tapped it against his palm. "Well, Miss Carter," he said, voice smooth with mock politeness. "It appears fate has promoted you." A few cooks chuckled. Emily stood beside the prep table, apron tied neatly, hands resting at her sides. "Marcus handles the sauce station," Victor continued. "Tonight you will take his place." The laughter stopped for a beat, replaced by startled looks. Even the dishwashers knew what that meant. Lauron House was famous for one item above all others, the imperial duck with black cherry reduction, a dish food magazines described as worth crossing the country to taste. The sauce required exact timing, layered heat, and a finishing balance so delicate that one extra teaspoon could ruin the entire pan. Marcus had trained for 2 years before Victor trusted him alone. Victor knew that, which was precisely why he chose it. "Chef," said one sous chef quietly, "we could 86 the duck for tonight." Victor turned slowly. "We do not remove excellence because someone is afraid." His gaze slid back to Emily. "And perhaps our new assistant will surprise us." The room understood the real meaning. He wanted a spectacle. Emily spoke calmly. "If you show me where everything is, I will do my best." Victor laughed once. "Your best. Inspiring." He snapped his fingers toward the copper pans hanging above the range. "Station 3. Shallots there. Stock reduced in the bain-marie. Cherries in the walk-in. If you burn anything, do it quietly." More laughter rose, thinner this time. Some of the staff no longer looked amused. Emily moved to Station 3 without argument. She hung a clean towel over her shoulder and surveyed the ingredients with a single slow glance. Her eyes noted temperatures, knife placement, seasoning bins, pan weight, burner height. Then she washed her hands again, not rushed, not nervous, but methodical. Victor watched from across the line. Confidence irritated him most when it came from people he had already judged. "Table 12 seated," called a server. "7 has arrived." "Of course he has," Victor muttered. Table 7 belonged to Daniel Monroe, a nationally known food columnist whose reviews could lift a restaurant for months or sink one in a weekend. Victor straightened his jacket. Tonight mattered. Yet instead of focusing on the dining room, he kept glancing toward Emily, waiting for panic. It never came. Orders began to print. Tickets rattled from the machine like warning bells. 2 scallops, 1 halibut, 3 duck, shouted the expediter. The kitchen erupted into motion. Flames rose beneath sauté pans. Plates warmed under heat lamps. Servers crossed in precise lanes. Victor commanded the room with clipped authority, but in the corner of his attention, Emily had already begun. She minced shallots into pieces so even they looked measured by machine. She reduced wine at a controlled simmer, not a boil. She mounted stock with butter in small turns, letting it shine rather than separate. One prep cook stopped chopping parsley just to stare. "Who taught her that?" he whispered. "Probably internet videos," another replied, though without conviction. Victor strode over suddenly and peered into her pan. "Too slow," he said. "Service is not a hobby class." Emily did not look up. "If rushed now, it breaks later." The nearest cooks went silent. Victor blinked once, surprised she had answered at all. "Excuse me?" he said. Emily finally met his eyes. "The emulsion needs patience." Her tone was respectful, almost gentle. It was the calm certainty that unsettled him. Victor leaned closer. "Take advice from me, not from your imagination." He spun away before she could reply. But the seed of discomfort had been planted. Minutes later, the first duck plates were ready for sauce. Every station slowed just enough to watch. Emily lifted the spoon, let the glossy reduction fall in a ribbon across porcelain, then finished each plate with identical precision. Not one drop out of place. Not one smear. Even the burners seemed quieter. Then the expediter stared at the plates and forgot to speak. The expediter finally found his voice. "Service!" he barked, almost too loudly, then hurried the plates through the swinging doors as if moving evidence before someone changed their mind. The kitchen remained strangely still for half a second after they left. Then burners hissed again. Knives resumed their rhythm, and everyone pretended nothing unusual had happened. But glances kept drifting toward Station 3. Emily Carter had not celebrated, smiled, or even looked around for approval. She simply wiped the rim of the next plate, reset her spoon, and checked the temperature of the remaining reduction with the back of her wrist. Victor Laurent noticed every movement. He told himself it meant nothing. A beginner can copy motions, he thought. Luck can happen once. But doubt had a way of entering quietly and refusing to leave. Next fire in 4 minutes, called the expediter. 2 more duck, 1 lamb, 1 sea bass. Victor snapped back into command. Move, faster. He plated lamb with unnecessary force, then turned toward Emily again. Taste that sauce. She did. Needs 1 grain more salt, she said. Several heads lifted. No one spoke to Victor that way. He narrowed his eyes, dipped a spoon, tasted, then silently added a pinch from the cellar. The nearest line cook nearly dropped a tray. Emily had been right. Victor felt heat rise in his neck. Coincidence, he muttered, though no one had accused him. Orders continued. The dining room was filling now, every table glowing beneath candlelight, servers gliding across carpet, wealthy guests laughing over expensive wine. Out front, compliments had already begun to return from table 12. Investors love the duck, a server announced. They asked if chef changed the recipe. Victor forced a smile. Tell them consistency is the mark of greatness. Yet his eyes cut immediately to Emily. She was slicing chives into perfect threads. At table 7, Daniel Monroe tasted his first course in thoughtful silence. He was known for writing less than other critics and meaning more. A single sentence from him could become a headline by sunrise. Victor had spent a week designing tonight's menu around that man's preferences. Now, he found himself worrying about the wrong person. Chef, said the pastry station quietly. Your garnish. Victor looked down. He had nearly sent a plate unfinished. That had never happened. Across the kitchen, Emily reached for a pan before it boiled over on another station, lowered the flame, then returned to her own work without comment. She moved like someone who could hear the entire room. Even the dishwasher noticed. Who is she? He whispered. No idea, said the prep cook. But she does not move like help. Another ticket printed. Then another. The machine rattled nonstop. Laurent House had entered the dangerous hour when every seat was full and one mistake could spread through service like smoke. Victor knew pressure better than anyone. It usually sharpened him. Tonight it distracted him. He kept searching Emily's face for nerves and found only focus. Chef, called a server from the door, trying to hide excitement. Mr. Monroe has a request. Victor straightened instantly. What request? He wants to personally thank whoever prepared the duck sauce. The room went silent. Even the exhaust fans seemed to fade. Victor gave a short laugh that sounded borrowed. Naturally. Tell him Chef Laurent appreciates his recognition. The server hesitated. I already did. Victor's expression tightened. And? He said no. He asked for the person who made it tonight. A spoon clattered somewhere in the back. Nobody bent to pick it up. Victor looked slowly toward Emily. She was arranging cherries in a shallow pan, as calm as if discussing the weather. Tell Mr. Monroe, Victor said carefully, that every plate in this kitchen reflects my standards. The server swallowed. I told him that too. And, he said, standards can be borrowed. Technique cannot. No one moved. Pride had built Victor's empire, but now it stood in the center of the kitchen with nowhere to hide. He stepped toward Emily, voice lowered to a sharp whisper. What exactly did you say to him? Emily looked up, surprised. Nothing, she answered. I have not left the station. Then the dining room doors opened again, and the general manager entered pale-faced, smoothing his tie. Chef, he said, softly. Mr. Monroe is coming back here himself. The words landed harder than a shouted command. Daniel Monroe was coming into the kitchen himself. In restaurants like Laurent House, that almost never happened. Critics remained in the dining room where opinions felt elegant and consequences arrived later in print. When one crossed through the swinging doors, it meant something immediate had already changed. Victor Laurent adjusted the cuffs of his jacket and forced his breathing steady. "Back to work," he ordered, though no one had stopped listening. "And clean this station." He pointed at a spotless counter simply to sound in control. Emily Carter continued stirring the reduction at a low flame, her movements measured, unaffected by the sudden tension rolling through the room. The general manager stood near the door with the anxious posture of a man trying to smile while expecting disaster. Then the doors opened again. Daniel Monroe stepped inside wearing a charcoal overcoat folded over one arm and a navy suit tailored with quiet expense. He was in his late 50s, silver at the temples, calm in the way only powerful people can afford to be. His eyes took in the room quickly, from burners to plating line to Victor's stiff expression. "Mr. Monroe," Victor said, stepping forward with polished warmth. "What an honor. I hope dinner has been memorable." Daniel gave a courteous nod but did not shake his hand. "It has," he replied. "Especially the duck." Victor smiled wider. "I am pleased to hear that." Daniel's gaze moved past him. "Who prepared the sauce tonight?" The kitchen held its breath. Victor answered smoothly. "Every dish served here is the result of a team guided by my standards." Daniel said nothing for a moment. Silence can be more revealing than speech when used by someone practiced in both. "That is not what I asked," he said at last. Victor's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "I supervise all final execution." Daniel stepped farther in, shoes quiet against the tile. "Interesting, because the sauce I tasted tonight showed restraint you have never been known for." A few cooks stared at the floor to hide their reactions. Daniel continued, voice calm and precise. "No unnecessary sweetness. No ego in the reduction. Just balance." Victor's face lost color by degrees. "My style evolves," he said, "as all serious chefs do." Daniel looked around once more, then stopped at station 3. Emily had set down her spoon and was wiping the handle clean. She met his eyes politely, not eagerly, not nervously. Recognition flickered across his face before he masked it. "May I speak with the woman at that station?" Victor moved quickly. "She is temporary staff. Inexperienced." "I assure you, she merely assisted." Emily said nothing. Daniel ignored Victor entirely and walked toward her. "Good evening," he said. "Have we met?" Emily gave a small smile. "A long time ago. Chicago. Charity gala. You sent back the dessert because it was too cold." Several cooks blinked in confusion. Daniel Monroe's expression softened into surprise, then certainty. "I did," he said, "and you sent it back perfect in 4 minutes." He took one step back and studied her face again. "Chef Emily Carter." The room went completely silent. A timer beeped somewhere near pastry until someone fumbled to turn it off. Victor stared as if the name belonged to another language. One line cook whispered, "No way." Another crossed himself without meaning to. Daniel gave a short, incredulous laugh. "You disappeared 3 years ago. Half the industry wondered where you went." Emily folded the towel neatly beside the stove. "I took time away." "Time away," Daniel said. "You were the youngest 3-star Michelin chef in Chicago. Reservations sold out 6 months ahead." Every word landed like a plate breaking in Victor's mind. He looked at Emily's gray sweater hanging from a hook, then at the hands he had ordered around all evening. Daniel turned toward Victor at last. "You had one of the finest chefs in America in your kitchen tonight." Victor opened his mouth, but pride had abandoned him. No sound came. Emily reached over, lowered the flame beneath the reduction, and spoke gently into the silence. "Your sauce was starting to split." No one in the kitchen moved. The hiss of burners, the ticking of timers, the clatter of pans that had ruled the room all evening seemed to retreat before a heavier sound. Silence mixed with realization. Victor Laurent stood beside his own station as if it no longer belonged to him. He had spent years building a reputation on certainty, and in less than a minute that certainty had been stripped away by a woman in a faded gray sweater who never once raised her voice. Daniel Monroe glanced around at the frozen staff and gave a faint smile. "Well," he said, "this explains the first honest sauce I have tasted in Manhattan all year." A nervous laugh escaped from somewhere near pastry, then quickly died. Victor swallowed. "Chef Carter," he began, forcing the title through a dry throat. "If I had known who you were—" Emily looked at him calmly. "You did know who I was," she said. "You knew exactly who I appeared to be." The words were gentle, but they landed with the weight of truth. Several employees lowered their eyes. Victor tried again. "There has been a misunderstanding." "No," Daniel Monroe said quietly. "There was an assessment." He turned toward the general manager. "And a very expensive one." The manager stiffened. Investors at table 12 had already heard the commotion through the open kitchen window. Servers whispered in corners. Rumors travel faster than waitstaff carrying champagne. Emily untied the apron and folded it with the same care she had shown every task that night. "Why were you here?" Daniel asked. She answered simply, "My sister lives in Brooklyn. I came to visit. A friend told me they needed help for one night. I thought it might be nice to work quietly again." Daniel shook his head with amused disbelief. "You vanished from magazines, from television, from conferences. People said burnout. Some said scandal. Others said retirement on a beach somewhere." Emily smiled faintly. "Mostly I wanted peace." Victor stared at the woman he had mocked for hours. Peace. The thing he had never learned to recognize because he confused noise with power. "Chef?" said the sous chef suddenly, speaking to Emily before fear could stop him. "Was the sauce really that close to breaking?" Emily turned kindly toward him. "Only if left another 30 seconds on high heat." The sugar was pushing ahead of the stock. The young man nodded as if receiving a private masterclass. Others leaned in without meaning to. Respect had shifted sides in the room and everyone felt it happen. Victor noticed it most of all. "You corrected my station," he said, unable to hide the bitterness in his own embarrassment. "I protected the guests," Emily replied. "That is the job." Daniel Monroe laughed softly. "There it is. The sentence too many famous chefs forget." He reached into his coat pocket and removed a small notebook. Victor's face tightened. A review written tonight would be read nationwide by morning. Daniel clicked his pen, then paused. "Chef Laurent, talent may impress people once. Character decides whether they return." He tucked the notebook away unopened. "I do not need to write anything harsher than what happened here." The general manager looked as though he might faint from gratitude and dread at the same time. Emily lifted her canvas tote from beneath the shelf. "You are leaving?" asked the pastry chef, sounding disappointed. "Dinner service is still busy." Emily glanced at the line, then at the staff who had watched in silence while she was ridiculed. "Only if they need me," she said. The sous chef stepped forward first. "We need you." Then another voice joined. "Please stay." Then another. Even the dishwasher raised a hand. Victor remained still, pride wrestling with necessity. Finally, he lowered his eyes and said the hardest words a man like him could speak. "Chef Carter, would you help us finish service?" Emily studied him for one long second. The room waited. Then she tied the apron back on, stepped to the center station, and with quiet authority said, "Yes, but from now on, we speak to each other with respect." No one argued. No one even breathed too loudly. Then she looked at the tickets stacked high and said, "All right, everyone, let us save dinner." The kitchen moved again, but it no longer moved the same way. Fear had driven Laurent House for years, sharp and loud, pushing hands faster while narrowing minds. Emily Carter replaced it with something quieter and far more dangerous to mediocrity. Clarity. She stepped to the center station, scanned the crowded rail of tickets once, and seemed to understand the whole room in a single glance. "Two duck resting too early," she said. "Lamb needs another minute. See base table 9 must go before table 12 repeats appetizers." Heads turned. She had been there less than an hour and already knew what some managers never learned. "You," she said gently to the young line cook who had trembled under Victor earlier. Stop rushing your garnish. Clean hands, steady wrist. To the pastry chef she added, warm those plates 10 seconds less or your sugar work will sweat. Then she looked at Victor. Call times clearly, not loudly, clearly. No one had ever corrected him in his own kitchen. Yet he only nodded. Service resumed under her rhythm. Orders came in waves. She organized stations like a conductor guiding musicians who had forgotten they were meant to create beauty, not survive panic. Fire table 6 now. Hold 7. Sauce behind you. Hot pan left. Her voice never rose, but everyone heard it. The difference was immediate. Hands steadied. Movements sharpened. Mistakes that usually multiplied during the dinner rush simply stopped happening. Even the servers noticed. They entered the kitchen tense and left calmer than they arrived. Daniel Monroe remained near the pass, leaning against the wall, watching with open fascination. He had seen famous chefs perform for cameras and investors, but mastery often looks smaller than fame expects. It looks like timing, attention, and kindness under pressure. At table 12, the investors sent compliments again. At table 7, Daniel ordered a second duck course, claiming it was for research. The general manager nearly wept with relief. Victor stood beside Emily at the pass, calling tickets as instructed. At first his voice carried old habits, clipped and harsh. Emily glanced at him once. The food here's the room, she said quietly. So do people. He blinked, then called the next order in a steadier tone. Prep cook nearly smiled. 30 minutes later, the rush that usually broke weaker teams arrived in full force. 6 tables seated at once. Private party dessert delayed. One guest allergic to shallots. Another requesting modifications no serious chef enjoys hearing. In the past, Victor would have erupted. Tonight he looked to Emily instead. She answered without drama. Separate pan for table 14. Mark allergy in red. Give the party complimentary sorbet while they wait. Say it was intentional. The manager hurried off to do exactly that. How did you know they would accept sorbet? Victor asked before he could stop himself. Because people forgive delays when they feel considered, Emily replied, spooning sauce onto a plate with perfect economy. Hospitality is not the same as ego. The sentence lingered longer than steam. Victor said nothing. Near the dish station, the dishwasher whispered to another employee, "This is the quietest busy night we have ever had." He was right. The room buzzed with effort, not chaos. No slammed pans. No insults. No flinching shoulders. Just work done well. Then a server rushed in carrying an empty plate from table 7. "Mr. Monroe has another message." Everyone paused. "He says this is the best service Laurent House has ever delivered." The room exhaled as one. Victor closed his eyes for half a second. Praise he had chased for years had arrived only after he surrendered control. Emily handed the next plate to the pass. "Do not celebrate yet," she said softly. "We still have 43 tickets." A few cooks laughed, surprised to hear joy in their own kitchen. Victor looked at her, then at the staff moving with confidence he had never managed to inspire. He realized something painful and clean at the same time. They had not improved because a star chef entered the room. They had improved because someone finally treated them like people. "Next pickup in 90 seconds, Emily called. "Beautiful work, everyone." And for the first time in many years, the staff of Laurent House straightened with pride instead of fear. By 9:30, the storm had passed. The wall of tickets that once hung from the rail like a threat had thinned to a manageable line. The last of the private party desserts left the pass on time. Table 14 thanked the staff for handling the allergy request so carefully, and the investors at table 12 ordered another bottle of wine instead of asking for the check. In fine dining, that was its own applause. The kitchen breathed easier now. Coats loosened, shoulders lowered. Someone at pastry hummed under his breath without realizing it. Emily Carter moved through cleanup tasks with the same attention she had given the rush, wiping stations, labeling containers, turning waste into order. She behaved not like a celebrity rediscovered, but like a professional finishing a shift. That detail impressed the staff more than any Michelin star ever could. Victor Laurent watched from the pass where he had spent years standing like a king on a narrow throne. Tonight the pass felt different, less like a pedestal and more like a responsibility. He noticed things he had ignored for too long. The burn marks on a cook's sleeve, the tired posture of the dishwasher, the way employees flinched whenever footsteps approached quickly. He had mistaken obedience for excellence because it benefited his pride. Emily set a tray of herbs into refrigeration and turned to the young line cook she had coached earlier. "Show me your garnish cut." The cook, whose name tag read Owen, swallowed nervously and presented a handful of chives. Emily inspected them, then smiled. "Better. Your knife is fighting you. Relax your grip." She adjusted his fingers gently on the handle. "The blade does the work." Owen tried again, and this time the cuts were clean and even. His face brightened with the kind of pride fear never produces. "Thank you, chef," he said. Victor heard the warmth in that single sentence and felt strangely ashamed. Daniel Monroe returned from the dining room carrying his coat. "I have stayed long enough to become staff," he said dryly. A few cooks laughed. He walked to the pass and looked directly at Victor. "Do you know what changed tonight?" Victor answered honestly. "Everything." Daniel shook his head. "No. One thing changed. The room stopped revolving around you." The words were not cruel. That made them harder to dismiss. Daniel turned to Emily. "There will be calls tomorrow. Interviews, investors, television producers pretending they always supported your break. You know that." "I know," Emily said. "And?" he asked. She looked around the kitchen, at Owen practicing knife cuts, at the pastry chef helping the dishwasher stack trays, at servers speaking to cooks instead of shouting through them. "And I am tired of rooms where no one listens until a famous person speaks." Daniel smiled slowly. "Then perhaps this city still needs you." He left a business card on the pass and headed for the door. Before exiting, he glanced back once. "For the record, my review will not be about the duck." Then he was gone. The staff exchanged looks. Reviews paid rent, but mystery fed imagination. Victor approached Emily carefully, like a man nearing a truth he had avoided for years. "I owe you an apology," he said. The kitchen quieted again. Emily continued folding towels. "Yes," she replied. There was no bitterness in it, only fact. Victor took a breath. "I judged you before you spoke. I used embarrassment as entertainment. I led badly." The words seemed to cost him something valuable. "I am sorry." Emily studied him, then nodded once. "That is a beginning." He glanced around at the staff who were pretending not to listen. "I do not know how to repair all of this." "Start tomorrow," she said. "Learn their names. Teach instead of threaten. Correct in private. Praise in public. Taste before blaming. And never confuse volume with standards." Each sentence landed like instruction carved in stone. Victor listened more carefully than he had listened to anyone in years. He extended his hand. "Would you consider consulting here? Even briefly?" Emily looked at his hand, then at the room. "I will consider helping them," she said. "The rest depends on whether you mean what you said tonight." She shook his hand once, firmly, then released it. Around them, the kitchen stood a little taller. Respect, once absent, had finally entered the building through the back door. The rain had stopped by the time Laurent House closed its doors. Outside, Manhattan sidewalks reflected the city lights in long silver streaks. Taxis rolled past in steady lines, and late diners laughed beneath umbrellas they no longer needed. Inside the restaurant, however, no one seemed eager to leave. Staff who usually escaped the moment cleanup ended lingered near stations, talking in low voices, replaying the night as if they had all witnessed something larger than service. In a way, they had. Emily Carter finished labeling the last container in the walk-in cooler and returned to the kitchen floor carrying nothing but her canvas tote. She moved through the room quietly, yet conversations paused whenever she passed. Respect has its own gravity. Owen approached first, clutching a small notebook smudged with sauce stains. "Chef," he said, embarrassed by his own boldness. "Would you sign this?" Emily blinked in surprise. It is a prep log. I know, he said. It is the only thing I had. She smiled and signed the inside cover with neat handwriting, then added 3 words beneath her name. Keep learning daily. Owen looked as if he had been handed a scholarship. Soon others gathered with menus, order pads, even a clean kitchen towel. Emily signed each one patiently, asking names as she went. Maya, pastry? Luis, dish station? Tessa, front service? People who had worked there for years realized she was learning their names faster in 10 minutes than management had in 10 months. Victor Laurent stood near the office door watching it happen. He had spent years demanding admiration and had never understood why it always felt thin. Emily had offered kindness for one night and received something real. The general manager approached him carefully. We need to talk about tomorrow, he said. Victor nodded. Yes, we start earlier. That too, the manager replied, lowering his voice. But I meant the phones. Daniel Monroe posted already. Victor's eyes widened. Posted what? The manager turned the screen toward him. It was a short message on social media, already spreading across the city. Tonight, I visited Laurent House and tasted the best dish they have served in years. Not because of fame, because humility briefly entered the kitchen. Victor stared at the words. There was no insult, no public destruction, no mention of his mistakes. Somehow that made it more powerful. Across the room, Emily was helping the dishwasher stack sheet pans no guest would ever know existed. Chef, Carter? Called the manager suddenly, too loudly from nerves. Would you mind a quick conversation in the office? Several heads turned. Emily looked over. If it is about money, no, she said pleasantly. If it is about people, maybe. A few cooks laughed. Even Victor did. Surprised him. They stepped into the office, a room lined with framed magazine covers praising Victor's genius. Emily glanced at them once and then at the single chair placed behind the desk like a throne. She remained standing. Victor noticed and did not sit either. I would like to make changes, he said. Real ones. Staff schedules, training, how we speak here, how we hire. I do not know where to begin. Emily set her tote on the floor. Begin by removing fear from the menu. He almost smiled. And if people take advantage? Then lead better, she answered. Standards and cruelty are not the same thing. The manager cleared his throat. Would you consult for us? Name your fee. Emily thought for a moment. My fee is simple. Raise wages for dish and prep staff. Paid meals for every shift. Weekly teaching sessions open to anyone here who wants to grow. And 1 scholarship each year for culinary students who cannot afford tuition. The manager stared. Victor looked ashamed all over again. Done, he said immediately. All of it. Emily studied his face to see if pride was bargaining behind the promise. Whatever she found seemed enough for now. She picked up her tote. Then I will return tomorrow morning at 8. As consultant? Victor asked. Emily opened the office door. As someone making sure you meant yes. When she stepped back into the kitchen, the staff straightened instinctively. See you tomorrow, she said. Cheers rose louder than any applause Laurent House had ever received. And Victor Laurent, once the loudest voice in the building, said nothing at all. The next morning, Laurent House opened 2 hours later than usual, yet the line outside began before sunrise. Word had traveled through Manhattan the way truth often does when pride can no longer block the door. Daniel Monroe's message had been shared thousands of times overnight. Food bloggers speculated, local stations requested interviews, and reservation phones rang so often the hostess muted one line just to hear herself think. But the biggest change was not outside on the sidewalk. It was in the kitchen at 8 a.m. sharp when Emily Carter walked through the back door carrying the same canvas tote and wearing the same gray sweater. This time, every person in the room looked up with respect. Good morning, chef, came a chorus from stations that had once laughed at her. Emily smiled. Good morning, aprons on. We start with fundamentals. Victor Laurent was already there, sleeves rolled, notebook in hand. No starched jacket, no raised voice. No audience, just a man who had finally discovered that status cannot teach what humility can. Emily handed him a marker. "Write everyone's name on the board." He did. Then she pointed to the dish station. "Start there for 1 hour." The room froze, waiting for outrage. None came. Victor nodded, tied on a rubber apron, and joined Luis at the sink. At first his motions were clumsy and too fast. Luis corrected him twice before realizing who he was correcting. Victor simply said, "Again." Shock gave way to laughter, then to something warmer. By noon, the kitchen smelled not of fear but fresh stock, citrus zest, and possibility. Emily moved from station to station teaching knife angles, seasoning balance, inventory discipline, and timing. She explained why sauces fail, why cooks panic, why teams collapse when ego enters the room before talent. Every lesson felt practical. Every sentence carried weight because she never used more words than necessary. Owen improved his cuts in a single hour. Maya redesigned the dessert plating with cleaner lines. Tessa from front service learned how to communicate allergies without sounding afraid to interrupt chefs. Even Luis was taught a faster rack system that saved 20 minutes each night. Small changes create large dignity when repeated daily. Reporters eventually arrived at the front door, cameras ready, eager for scandal or celebrity. The general manager asked if Emily would speak to them. "No," she said. "Feed the guests first." By dinner service, every seat was booked. The staff stood straighter than they had the night before, not because a famous chef was present, but because someone had shown them they mattered. Victor approached Emily before doors opened. "I have spent years trying to be admired," he said quietly. "Today was the first time I tried to be useful." Emily adjusted a tray of herbs. "Keep choosing that." He nodded. "Will you stay?" She looked around the room, at names now written on schedules, at meals prepared for staff before guests arrived, at cooks speaking without flinching. "I will visit," she said. "This place does not need saving every day. It needs consistency every day." Service began. Plates moved cleanly, tickets stayed organized, and compliments returned faster than orders. Daniel Monroe came back that evening, sat quietly, and left only a handwritten note at the host's stand. It was framed by the manager the next morning. It read, "Great food impresses the mouth. Great leadership nourishes the room." Weeks later, Laurent House still had lines outside, but inside the real transformation remained the same. Victor learned names before criticism. Praise was public. Corrections were private. Staff turnover stopped.